Awesome. We're technically officially starting streaming, but we're gonna wait for about 5 minutes to kind of get buy-in. So we'll just kind of chill here the first 5 minutes.
Cool.
Hello, Ben. I love the band on your head. Do you just go to the gym? I know Gary just went to the gym. The thing,
No, I just look like this.
look, the thing is, I envy are the lifestyle of people who go to gym early in the morning or people who run in the morning. I feel like those are the people that get their life together. You know what I mean? It's like the epitome of like health. Like I am, you know, I just crawl out of bed. Brittany, how are you after the? I think I heard you were also coughing after EastEnders too. Did you recover?
The sickness is almost out of my system.
The sickness is 30%, 35% still in my system.
It's still lingering.
Getting there though.
Hi everyone.
Good to see you, Brittany.
Hi Gary. Hi Ben.
Question:
So
QZ,
cool.
Colton, and Lonnie, are any of y'all sick from the
No.
EastEnders?
No.
Somehow I dodged the whole thing.
Same.
Colton, I'm surprised you dodged it because you and I chatted for like an hour. And I'm like so sick. When I was home, I'm like dead in the bed. I am like it's radiating off of me. I went to the urgent care and everything. I am like,
Oh man.
I am glad that you are free from that, or else that'd be super good.
Well, I'm glad you're out of the ER too. Boy, that sounds like a real trip. Yeah, I don't know. Built up my immune system.
I think Colton's audio was off for a bit, right?
Sorry, why don't you guys just talk? I'll go back on mute.
Lonnie, how are you feeling?
I'm doing good, just reacclimating at home. I also escaped the buffercron. I don't know how.
Wow, that's amazing.
Buffercron, that's hilarious.
That's funny. I think this is the first time I've seen East Law here. And
Yeah.
Murat.
Oh, hi, nice to be here. Gary invited me, and we're talking about. I did not get COVID. I got it from the mouth parts. So I think I'm COVID, at least for the next 6 months or so.
Yeah.
I hope everyone's feeling better, and it's not a fun disease. So definitely take it very seriously.
Absolutely. Actually, yeah, thanks for inviting Isla. Murat, do you want to kind of introduce yourself? I think you are also working on some of the library initiatives. It's kind of like, because everybody in here kind of already know each other, so we'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Yes, I still working on it. By the way, I created some more visuals. I shared on the thread. I also will design the ends for the library, and I can introduce myself. This is Murat from Turkey. I'm 33 years old. I design and code for machinery companies for about 10 years, B2B companies mostly. I also had them in design, and I also had them in sales and recruiting people. And that's all.
Cool. Welcome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, can you share also in the Public Goods Library channel, like the artwork that you're working on? If anybody have any thoughts or that you want to add to that in terms of editing, feel super free. But in the meantime, just kind of note on everybody, we are also recording this video in case anybody's want to not be recorded. We also are streaming it on YouTube. we also have a thread conversation where we will following along with with this in case you prefer like to chat or have articles or thoughts to share. Somebody else is talking. I will be tagging you guys in the thread, and so feel free to continue the conversation. All right, go ahead, Gary. All for you. Also, hi Paul. Haven't seen you in a while. Thanks for joining. All right, go ahead, Gary.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Lynn, for having me and having a few of us who've been just thinking about this kind of really special time that we're in. I think so. A little bit of background for those of you who don't know it. I come into this space like having been super skeptical of the space, and like I put a little money in Ethereum, like purely for just because I thought the number was going to go up in 2017. Didn't really look at it literally until like August of 2021 when I met Scott from Gitcoin, and by that time we had Civics Unplugged, which is a nonprofit that I co-founded. We already had almost 1,000 alumni across 40 plus countries that were kind of on a pathway to becoming civic innovators in the US and around the world. And I think just through talking to like the rare, at the time felt super rare, like regenerative crypto type people. Scott gave the encouragement that it's not crazy for Civics Unplugged to start a DAO, where the point is to train the highest potential generation that we've seen in I would argue like the last 100 years in some of the most powerful technologies that we can even imagine. So like this idea of Gen Z and Web3 and imagining and changing the world, like it's like, all right, what kind of name do we want to call this? We want to call this the Dream DAO. And so that's been a really cool experiment over the last few months. QZ, well, a lot of people on this call now, but QZ is a champion of ours. Madison and Ale are builders, so they're in that 15 to 20-year-old demographic of people that are like really ramping up into Web3 and already making contributions. And so like this experiment has like it really exceeded my expectations. But in terms of the timeline of crypto adoption period, like, and also the urgency of like helping people understand like how much potential there is, it didn't really click to me until ETHember, where we all got sick apparently. But I think a lot of us also got kind of infected with this like belief in the future. Like I think it was just a very different experience. Also, like QZ and I had like talked a lot. He's helped a lot in the Dream DAO, for example. But like actually getting to spend time with QZ was like a really cool experience. Oh, you're a real person. And then the kind of that experience goes on for like several dozen people that I'm like, I'm not alone. We're not alone. And kind of realizing like there's actually a reason to be optimistic that isn't delusional. But we have to keep working together. We have to keep creating this like generator function of great people, great ideas, investing in these ideas, investing in these public goods. And then simultaneously, we have like through various conversations, including just encountering Andrew Yang's speech about the kind of urgency of this time, and also seeing many very prominent elected officials and regulators talking very negatively about this technology that has the power to regenerate the world. That was a kind of, and in addition to that, right, Kevin? Hey, Kevin. Kevin's book. He's very humble about how he's put this together. It's kind of just like what I was describing how Kevin put together his book to some of our Dream DAO builders, and like a lot of what we call like those individual pages are like brain drops. So just like coherent chunks of thought, and then just like compiled together. And it's kind of funny having like encountered almost every single concept in that book, but also just like it all synthesized in this like beautiful way that I know is going to evolve. Yeah, so this combination of seeing that this regenerative community is being defined and being formed and kind of quickly so, and seeing that there's an appetite for greenpilling people, and seeing that we're in America, whether we like it or not, sets the tone for honestly far too much, but it sets the tone for policy around the world, including tech policy. Um, it all kind of came together in this realization that we need to green pill some of America's most powerful cultural, business, and especially political leaders in the lead up to this midterms. We need to actually we need to seize on this we need to strike while the iron's hot, because it's truly not clear whether we're going to have the chance to do this a year or two from now, and we can't take that chance. And we also just want to bring more builders into this movement. And so I don't know how many of you had a chance to check out the doc that Lynn shared. I can kind of reshare it here. But yeah, Ben, like we have the opportunity to here's how I'm seeing it. Like, regen crypto should be the default narrative of what crypto is, not Ponzi schemes, not scams, not like I always point this out as an example because it was actually pretty alarming to me like a few months ago. Like for 2 days, someone bottling their farts and minting them as NFTs was like the #1 story about Web3. And like and I'm not trying to like say that there was like some conspiracy against it. It's kind of just like a funny story, and like it's kind of an easy win for like a journalist, right? But like we're not gonna control our own narrative if we just allow for kind of people to emergently just tweet a little bit here about this, and also just journalists to kind of figure out for themselves, right? I was on the phone with an Austin Chronicle reporter who just saw that I was a South by Southwest speaker, and she didn't know anything that was happening in this Gitcoin ecosystem. She did not know what Gitcoin was. She did not know anything about refi. I sent her, hope this is okay, Kevin. I sent her a copy of your book, and I sent her the speech Andrew Yang made, and I sent her texts that I have with 16, 17, 18-year-olds that are literally working with their seat, like for example, this kid, 18 years old, working on decentralized identity with the Buenos Aires innovation department. Like these are the stories that need to be told, right? And these are stories that not even every Gitcoin person knows, right? Not every DreamDAO person knows these stories. So whatever it is, right? I really come here with an open mind about exactly what the method through which we control our own narrative is, but I can't imagine a better community to kind of co-ideate on how to do that with than the Gitcoin community. I think all the DreamDAO builders can attest to that. They're huge fans. I know, Madison, for example. Do you want to talk about like your perception of like the kind of importance of like the messenger and also the co-ideators?
Yeah, I think that, like, first of all, just to like speak to the importance of this, like a piece of media that, as Gary said, helps us almost like establish the narrative of how Web3 can do good in the world. It's the bare minimum that the next phase of the web is not regulated out of existence, right? Like that's insane that that's even in conversation. But banning Web3 technologies is, again, the bare minimum. And just because they're not banned doesn't mean the full potential is realized to do good in the world. And so we need an extremely popular, inspiring, and entertaining piece of media that shows people the potential of this technology to build public goods and do good in the world.
Look at media and storytelling and Web3 sort of as an opportunity, right? Like a lot of the stories that are getting published and attention is very, degen. And, just kind of, I'm very new to Gitcoin, admittedly, but I've been in crypto a long time. And what I love about this sort of like younger generation is that they want regenerative technologies. They want to do good. They want to be optimistic. And I think Gary's like very much like lives that. And what he's done with DreamDAO and everything else, which I'm more familiar with. So I think it's like, yeah, Web3 is important and just making sure the technology isn't overregulated and destroyed, but also just like almost like a car, just saying like how fast can this car go? You know, like if we're gonna produce a piece of content, like making sure it has the maximum impact possible and really shows what the technology can do and what the technology can do when coupled with a good and powerful message that's not, oh, we're just aping into something and lighting money on fire. Like I'm frankly tired of that narrative.
Yeah, I do want to speak up from like my perspective of like joining crypto like from the Gitcoin community. Like that was my first like impression of crypto. So when I surround myself around builders, right, and then like I was just working in a public good space, and I had I mean I've kind of talked about the story already, but it always kind of ties back to like the different perception where I was talking to my cousin who was just very involved in the more on the stock side, not on the monetary side, those who are exposed to the mainstream side of crypto first and foremost in terms of like what mainstream media kind of tells you, and the conversation was just very different. I was just thinking about like crypto like building, right, but he was thinking about oh how much you made for etc etc, and like the conversation was just like really bizarre, and I was like oh right, I forgot that was the main thing. So that's why I always thinking like building a community and like a system where like the first entrance to crypto should be like the thoughts behind it, not the actual. But then again, I guess it talks about like the incentive of Web3, which is like a lot of it is monetary aspect for a lot of people. So it's kind of like what is the incentive behind spreading that message behind like the building? Like what technology is being worked on currently that is, I don't know, has big incentive for people to join? Kind of, yeah. That's kind of like my question there.
A brief introduction. Hi everyone, I'm Ian. I'm totally new, to Gitcoin and all this, but Gary introduced me to it on Monday with a whole bunch of amazing ideas, and I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. Anyways, I just want to contribute my 2 cents that I've thought about in the past 2 days as Gary kind of sent me some resources to get into, including the Andrew Yang talk and Kevin's book, which I haven't finished and I'm kind of wolfing down right now. Relatively new to this space, so I'm not an expert in crypto. I'm not an expert in, regenerative crypto economics and things like that. I come from a purely storytelling perspective, and I'm kind of looking forward to diving in. But in my view, in order to get more people aboard and to understand it, the fundamental problem is that, like, I don't think there's a piece of media out there that like makes this emotional and appeals to our like personal values in terms of like, let me tell you about my journey of I led Jubilee creative team for about 3 years, and I experienced all sorts of like making media that reached hundreds of millions of people and things like that, but I burned out at the end of it because the entire system was designed for short-term viewership, growth, subscribers, and this problem like killed me because I was forced to make, I felt like week after week, like videos that would get tons of views and grow. The sustainability of the company, just had to keep making videos to, feed people in our company essentially. I got super burned out and I had an existential crisis. Like, what am I doing with my life? Did I get into this to just like get views and, to just massively scale a company? Like, what am I doing here? I quit my job. COVID happened. I did some soul searching and I was like, okay, like, how can I find something where we're actually dedicating ourselves to a mission that is meaningful, that is not just about growing and trying to, get VC capital and things like that, and actually like make a positive, sustainable difference. And I think that individual story that I've gone through is actually something a lot of people can resonate with, where COVID has been a time where people are re-examining their values. It kind of seems like the world is going to shit. Like, people aren't treating me well at my job. I want to go somewhere else and work for something better. What's something meaningful that I can give myself to? I'm kind of all over the place. My thoughts aren't like cohesive, but all to say, I think that like the first hurdle to overcome is like, how do we make the story extremely personal in this time of COVID that has kind of like shaken people's like fundamental worldviews and have them soul searching? And how do we speak to all the people who've been how do we speak to all the people who've been soul searching the last 2 years and provide them with a clear direction? And in my view, if there's a documentary made, I don't think it should be about the technology at the forefront. And the reason I say that is because I think the essence of Gitcoin and regenerative crypto economics is fundamentally it's trying to build a world that is a win-win for everybody, and it's trying to live for a
Yes.
higher calling, right?
Yes.
For that reason, I think it has to start with the essence of like, we can live for something greater. There are values that are higher than just personal growth or like scaling a company. There is a mission that we can all go for. The current best solution to this is regenerative crypto economics, which is a tool to serve that greater mission towards a win-win for everybody, right? So it's like you have to start, I think, with like the personal, what do you want to do with your life? How do you want to like spend it in the most meaningful way? Explain the context of what the hell has been going on. The world is kind of going to shit. The best solution we know so far is this, and then create like a really, really tangible, actionable of like what people can do to like, I saw Kevin had something where it's like 1% of your net worth, dedicated, or whatever,
yeah.
like it's really specific. What is that simple thing? Because considering everything and the information that I'm trying to like dive into and understand this space, there's so much information that like it's gonna fly over people's heads. Like in order to reach the masses, you have to whittle it down to something you can literally explain in like one sentence. That's what I learned at my time at Jubilee. Like if it has any like complicated jargon or like or like you have to go through a whole thing or like read a book to understand the context, like people aren't gonna get it. It has to be like what is the one singular idea to get across, and then the one really simple actionable, and then it's something you can throw in front of like anybody. Like one metric we used to use at Jubilee is like, will somebody in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, that's like a 12-year-old understand this? And will like an 80-year-old grandma in like Amsterdam, or somewhere random understand? Like you have to think about the spectrum of people. Like what's the widest spectrum possible, and what's the singular idea or framework that all those people in the spectrum will get? Anyways, it's just like a whole ramble there for. I feel like I did a word vomit, but I'm happy to. I felt like it's something I wanted to share, and happy to kind of punk thoughts.
Well, yeah, I want to hear what other people have to say, but I just wanted to just say thank you so much for sharing that. I think you kind of you made us feel what the whatever media that we put out needs to make us feel, right? It cannot be just like here's like 10 facts about regenerative cryptonomics, which I think actually this is something Gitcoin is like multiple standard deviations better than other like DAOs and protocols at like communicating like the spirit of things, like memes. Like I think it's like hilarious and awesome that there's I was talking to Brittany about this, like it's hilarious and amazing and awesome that there's a MMM department. I think every serious DAO that wants to shape culture should have something like that. Memes merchant marketing. But I think, I mean, yes, individual projects can excite me, for example, but it's like it's like the excitement of working with the kids in DreamDAO. It's the excitement of like, it's like Lonnie's energy, right? It's like it's like knowing that Kevin just like works so hard, right, to just like do like a million things, and like it's just like whoa, like how do we create this mosaic of like no, this is what Web3 is or can be, especially if the story if we take control of the story. I'm gonna take a look at the chat. So Ben's typing a lot. Ben, you want to jump in at all?
I will say, Gary, that one of the problems I've had is like compressing it all into a meme that is comprehensible to the mainstream. Like I was on CoinDesk this morning and I had like a 15-second segment and I started getting into like global, transparent, immutable ledger for coordination, and like there's all these coordination failures like climate change, and then like by the time I like really set the foundation, the segment was over. And so I guess like what's that mimetic payload that like pulls people down the rabbit hole that gives people hope that's not too technocratic or long or complicated is still what I feel like I'm always searching for.
Well, Kevin,
I think,
what about the green pill? I mean, just the green pill, like as a symbolic thing, I think has a lot of power. I think, you know, what it is you're trying to communicate is going to take time. And there's layers to it, right? And unfortunately, we can't get everybody to read a book. Everybody should read books, but I think starting with the symbolism that you created and trying to, you know, build something, even if it's small to start off with, where we're speaking the same language and go from there. But would love to hear your thoughts because, you know, I mean, you created this movement, you pulled in the right people for it to catch fire, and, you know, everybody's here because of it. So I do think you have a lot of good symbolism to start off with.
Thanks for saying that, but we're just creating a channel for greater combinations of strength and intelligence to come together. I didn't create anything. It's everyone. I do think that like one of the big opportunities that I see is like when people graduate from school, work at an impact DAO. Just work at a DAO, work at an impact DAO, because we all spend 40 hours a week at least on work. And you're going to channel people's collective movement if you can replace work for them. And more than if you are like, they have to work some corporate job and then they work nights and weekends on this. So I think that that's like the key, but then you have to route them to impact DAOs, and then the impact DAOs have to have work for them that actually create impact on the world. Like that's the cycle, I think. And maybe it's not just when you graduate from school, but like my dream with Gitcoin is like 1,000 engineers that work at JP Morgan come quit and work on open source software. So I do think that work is the channel through which it can happen.
1000%. Like people need work, and I think that's one of the better things to communicate, if not the most important thing.
So a few thoughts. I met like six college dropouts or people that are on infinite gap years this weekend, hacking on Ukraine DAO, Ukraine DeFi type stuff, and like they're like Ian is 100% right. We are in this like everyone kind of like I don't know if everyone knows that everyone else knows it, but it's like it's like there's like a sociological term where like everyone's feeling something, but they don't know that other people are on the same page, and that they're seeking something much bigger, and that and like there's like this almost like beautiful like narrative like piece of like, you know, that thing that you were told was a scam and it's destroying the environment, blah blah blah. It's like this is the exact opposite. The potential is the exact opposite, and like your mission right now is to like it's almost like it's literally like it's kind of like a video game, right? So like Kevin's world of like everyone joining impact DAOs is like at least kind of like a year out, right? Step one is just making sure that like Hillary Clinton bashing crypto does not lead to its demise, right? I'm not just singling out one person. right? But we like the first mission is like this emerging movement coming together with a focus of like November is like the key time where like we have concrete objectives of green pilling, especially elected officials in the US. And then once we have like leveled up as a community and accomplished these goals, we can move on to greater bosses, right? We can move on to other continents. We can move on to like, focusing our energy on like empowering people to create new impact DAOs. But like I mean, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the number one mission of this election year is to just ensure that, again, two things: that the worst doesn't happen of like DAOs, stablecoins, DeFi being banned, and also ensuring that the best happens, where you just have adoption from like people like Suarez or like Eric Adams, right, and them actually implementing, for example, like a local version of quadratic goods funding. Like it's like these people would actually be receptive to that, right? And Gitcoin's already building that tooling, right? So
Yeah. I just,
Go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. I just wanted to add on to what Kevin said. I think that we need to show people that Web3 can level up their personal careers, but also that it can level up their leaders. And so we need to show them the power of the technology so that they can create demand for Web3 technologies to be implemented in every sector of society and leverage its power to increase transparency and coordination in the world. And so I think that it helps both them personally, but also like leaders aren't going to leverage this tool unless it becomes a competitive advantage for them and people really show that they want it. And so I think that like both of those are really important.
Yeah, I think that exact same thing, like having showing them the actual impact and that they can actually like do their careers within this. Like similar to like if we show them like how crypto will enable to like bring financial like DeFi, like the whole sorry, there's a track. But the whole idea of like reaching indigenous communities and giving them like Celo is doing, like giving them actually available to be banked and like create their own economic systems around like regenerative principles. Like I think it is also the case of like how Gitcoin, for example, one of their main things also is like bringing this immense energy and abundance mindset towards public goods that now you can actually like give your time, give your energy, and like get rewarded and like live sustainably, like a sustainable life by funding, building, and doing work that is actually good for the world, and how crypto is like an avenue for that. So kind of like showing those stories. And I think it would also be cool to have like some session like this where we imagine like a collective, like a mirror board or something, of imagining like a collective future we want to create where people are able to work on these different areas of impact DAOs. Like if we start talking about how the distributed ledger or like the different, like the actual blockchain, Django, and like the actual technical side behind, like people are gonna get lost. But if we tell them, oh, you can actually start working in like food production or like or growing organic farms or like different actual like work that people are already doing but through crypto and Web3, kind of like how would that look like, what infrastructure would we need to create. Maybe that's like even co-working spots where people can actually go and co-work together and jam on these ideas and not be remote working, because like that way you can actually see the real humans like in Denver. So I don't know, like I didn't have a clear idea, but it's a lot about like shifting the narrative of different points where people are coming in. For example, decentralized science, like now so many scientists are coming into the space, into Web3, because it was enabled for them to actually use their own skills and talents and their own knowledge to accelerate research, accelerate peer reviews, and get rewarded for it. So now, like a huge, like there's so many people in decentralized science like that just came in the past few weeks or months because that specific niche was enabled by crypto in a way that speaks to their own talents and their own passions.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. I also noticed like in the chat that Michelle also brought up a really interesting question as well. She's asking like, why is it important or not important to involve the state when thinking about the public goods funding? What are the harm associated? What community can be built? Michelle, I don't know if you want to kind of add on to that before people kind of start thinking about it. It can be found in chat as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you so much for calling me in, Lynn. Yeah, I was really just thinking about what Gary was sharing. All like I think the vision I'm hearing is really very positive, but I guess I'm trying to play devil's advocate a little bit and wonder why, when we think about public goods, why is it synonymous with involving the state in elevating, I guess, this framework? I think like what I'm thinking about maybe in particular is thinking about like mutual aid organizations in local communities. Like these are ways that I think in my eyes seem to be pushing this larger messaging of, building public goods or also sort of, building solidarity with each other such that we don't have to involve government or state intervention. So I just wanted to sort of ask an open question here around like, yeah, what are
I
the
mean,
limitations or harms associated with involving the state?
I think it's something that is sort of dangerous and we have to be careful with, right? Because we don't want the state or the federal government to get involved such that the system is dependent upon it. Obviously, that like defeats the whole purpose. I'd like to hear Gary's thoughts on this, but my sort of intuition tells me, and I've spoken with Gary about this in a lot of detail. I think we're not looking so much for consent from the government or participation from the government as we want individualistic support from representatives in the government, and sort of a laissez-faire approach or a supportive approach to lead to less to lead to more clarity for social impact entrepreneurs. So when they're forming DAOs, that this can be done more easily through tooling and really. So I don't think government participation is something to strive for, but I do think more regulatory clarity could be helpful. And I'd be interested to hear some of the Gitcoins people's thoughts about DAO management. I'm a securities and DAO attorney. So, I have a certain perspective on things, but I would love to hear other people's. And I think it's a very good point and something to be cautious of with the communication.
Yeah, so anyone can jump in after me. But yeah, Michelle, really great point. The point is not to just like, this is not an operation to weave blockchain into government. This is a operation to build a groundswell of support for all sorts of use cases across sectors with regenerative crypto, like with regen crypto. And so, what are we doing right now? This is like basically a self-organized association of like global citizens, and we need more. We need more impact DAOs, right? We need, I mean, there's an opportunity, right? If there's influential business leaders, right, to just understand how they can build more like empowering businesses for their customers. There's opportunity for sports teams to recognize that they can empower fans with DAO-like technologies. But yeah, politics was one of the greatest areas to have civic innovation, because it's not even serving the politicians, not even serving the regulators. And there's we don't have to get too into those specific ideas that involve blockchain, but there is plenty of use cases in that do relate to government, but that's just one sector that should be supportive of this regenerative movement.
So, I mean, I really am happy that you brought up mutual aid because I think mutual aid is probably the best example for like what Web3 governmental public goods type of stuff that vibe is, because mutual aid exists outside of the government and it's like hyper local communities caring for their own communities. And I think that that's an incredible model for what we're trying to do, is like mutual aid, but make it global, or make it internet, or make it digital, or make it Web3, however you want to make it. But I do think that putting the government on the blockchain is different than like mutual aid accomplished through cryptographic technologies. Mutual aid, I think, is the best framework or mental model for how we can have digital public goods catch fire or be positive or be something more than it is right now. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I just want to plus one that, like, I think there's certainly room for government to be involved in these things, but I think ultimately it needs to be one of many options. Like right now, the problem is that most things that are actually funded there's almost like in some ways it's good because there's not other people or other groups that will like fund them, and so there is a market failure, and so like the government steps in and funds them. I'm not like here to be like, oh, like, we shouldn't have any government support. But I think that often what happens is we kind of like forget about those like mutual aid type mechanisms. There's a great set of thinking around this in this sort of like series of essays around, or like kind of frameworks around, like how different groups at scale can like create their own sort of micro solidarity that Richard Bartlett came up with, that I'll share in the chat, that I think would be really relevant here. But that's how I think about like, if we're going to work alongside government, what do those organizations and what do those like, DAO type structures look like in practice?
Some thoughts I had about that was also, for example, I'm from Peru, and Peruvian's government is like pretty ineffective and pretty corrupt and inefficient. So like for me, like think about the government was like, let's just keep building. Like I don't care about the government because they're never useful at all, and they're never even a constraint for anything like in Peru. But then I watched kind of like Andrew Yang's talk, and I was like, oh, actually, like including the government is actually really useful because it will allow more innovation to happen, more entrepreneurs to actually kind of like support this, and even like the laws, like we won't be like struggling with like, oh, like is this going to be banned, or are we going to get fines or stuff like that for working within crypto. And then another thought was that like not necessarily government, but also including like these huge institutions, like in some way, how can we work together? How can we work together with the UN or like with UNICEF to make them more accountable? Like we want to increase transparency in like donations or in like the actual impact work done. So if we kind of show them how they could include blockchain and trace and different like possibility for people to actually make sure to see that the donations are actually going towards the right things and actually making a change instead of being stuck like in bureaucracy, like that could be like a huge enabler. I think UNICEF is already doing like crypto grants and blockchain grants. So how do we merge those worlds without, but like caveating that we don't want to create these massive institutions that have the centralized power and make all decisions without us knowing.
Yeah, I think that it depends on like case basis, because there are some things that individuals can do better than government, but there are some advantages that governments have when it comes to like solving problems. So for example, right now I'm working on a project that's basically like a private funded UBI that gives people Bitcoin. And so like wealthy individuals donate to a city of their choice and they're given Bitcoin. And the current design thinking is that we would work with municipalities so that they can utilize social security number, tax records, things like that to automatically distribute to people, so they don't have to create their own wallets and like navigate like setting all of that up. And so it makes it more accessible to people that they automatically receive it. And so I think that there are certain situations like those where it makes sense to involve government because they have like a unique advantage. So there could be like interesting use cases for private-public partnerships, and then also like other people brought up like use cases for just like leveling up government in general.
Well, I think it's like, the way that I kind of look at government, and this is just my perspective, is it's like sort of a dangerous thing that you have to be careful with, but it is a tool, right? And I think governments do good things and they do bad things, just like people do. So I think, to the extent that it can be a safe place, that the government can make, blockchain technologies sort of like safer for the market participants or add more clarity. So I see this a lot is international companies or foundations afraid to come and build communities in the US because they're afraid of regulatory challenges. And I think that's a huge problem that needs to be addressed very quickly.
Something I just wanted to add. Well, I mean, just coming out of the like crypto donations, this is something I've been thinking about. Is like, and tell me if it's slap my hand if it's too off topic and yell at me or whatever. But really crazy thing about NFTs is they create perpetual markets. They merge the primary market with the secondary market, selling and reselling perpetual royalties, all that type of stuff. Where I find that to be really interesting is take something with only a primary market, like and nonprofit donations, and what does it mean? Like, what incentive structures arise from creating secondary markets for donations? If every donation was rewarded with an NFT, what does that even mean? Like, what sort of outcomes come out of like creating more economies for like value-based spend?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. The prospect of a POAP from the Ukraine government pushed me over the edge. So incentives, I mean, Web3, like, yeah, it's not just like the technology. It's the fact that, especially like Kernel, was like constantly talking about incentives and like purpose and right community and all these things. It's like this all needs to be captured in a cohesive story about like, I would say like the emergent possibilities of the future. Like, yeah, we can get caught up on like the tactical details of like who we should green pill, what they should be advocating for, and we'll figure that out. But I think just to go back to what Ewan's talking about, like, I mean, what motivates me personally is the possibility of building MLK's beloved community, which is like a future where there's like no more hunger, there's no more war, there's like all these good things, right? There's human flourishing, there's planetary flourishing, and it's not just the blockchain that is going to enable this. It is a kind of emergent spirit that is being kind of cultivated and harnessed and grown and infecting so many people that will infect so many people to yeah, I mean, I'm not figuring out how to distill this perfectly, but like, again, Gitcoin's good at naming things. Like, we have the kernel of the beloved community. I really feel like that. I really feel that, and I think we need to really bring more people into this regenerative digital physical world that we're building.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at things a little bit from a media perspective, and what I think you said is like really powerful. Like, can't live in a world where everybody can't have access to like MLK's like I have a dream speech. Like that's like I think a very like fundamental baseline problem to solve. And it's probably an internet and connectivity problem at this point, but I do think it goes to censorship as well. And so that's why I think the power of like telling these stories in a decentralized way, it's important. Even though they're not, maybe the community isn't big now, it will grow. It'll be bigger in 5 years. And it's not really about the audience today. It's about making sure the audiences of the future have the availability to this content and these sort of positive messages.
I do have a question. I think one of the things that Gary kind of like presented with this question that we should probably think about is like, what are the risks of Web3's future and what can we learn from the failed movements? So I think those are two things that we should ask. Like right now, it's like we're envisioning a very optimistic future, but like what's actually preventing us from actually achieving it? What are the obstacles that we have right now? And like what are the harms way? What like I think it's good to think and it's like kind of go back into like reality for a bit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lynn. That's great.
Yeah, we'd love to have people's thoughts on it.
So I think something that came up recently is that Web3 is sort of being co-opted by the VC community. And I was reading Coinbase's strategy like yesterday. It's on CB Insights, you can take a look. But basically it's ironic where they are saying that, oh, we are part of this decentralized ecosystem by being the centralized point for you to buy and sell crypto. And I think this is gonna keep happening because it's the old playbook where you're trying to build more and more platforms that sacrifice, privacy, security, and like sovereignty even for convenience, and people do it willingly. And in fact, just give them a $5 voucher and they will sign up for it. So I think that's actually one of the biggest threats to like what we're trying to build here, because what we're trying to do, all the whole like incentive mechanisms and all that, that requires resourcing. And in the space, there are some bad players potentially that have a lot of resources. I mean, if you look at how Spotify essentially transformed the whole music market, right? And now like artists are sort of like trapped in Spotify. It takes a lot of energy to sort of like tear down some of these. What's Alec doing? Sorry. It takes a lot of energy to tear down some of these like walled gardens that have even popped up over time. This is not the first time that has happened. I think when you look at the history of open source, and I encourage you to take a look a bit about when, like, I think Oracle was suing Google or something, and then now Google is suing back another company for the same reason of like taking a piece of their software. When Microsoft was suing, I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges. My guess, hearing from regulators, is that actually, so from a Singaporean perspective, right, why we haven't really done much on crypto is, my guess is that we are just acting dumb, because we know that if you don't tax crypto, and I'm not taxed, then rich people will just come in, and then Singapore will be a haven once again. I just read an article today that our super high net worth individuals increased by 40% last year. 40%, in the middle of a pandemic. So it's probably that coordination failure only fails for certain parts of society. My guess is that there are entire chunks of society that are coordinating very well to extract from every other part of it, and that's what we are fighting. But these are the parts that have a lot of like resourcing. So how do we sort of prevent them from co-opting this other space? Actually, that's really the biggest challenge. Yeah.
I think that's huge. I want to have a nuanced discussion about this. So I think it's important that there's not even like decentralized people that we really like. I think that this needs to be like, the story needs to be told by like a community from the start, including like, so the idea is that we need some seed funding to get the first pilot and maybe the second episode. And so who is providing that seed funding is an open question. I mean, obviously we'd like some seed funding from Gitcoin, right? But it cannot just, like, both from an optics perspective and also just practicality perspective, it should probably be from like 10 Web3 institutions that we like, right? So it should probably be like Polygon, it should probably be, Uniswap, it should probably be, the list goes on. Y'all know as well as I do about who would have the best intentions about all this. I'd also say like I actually yesterday just got off the phone with Coinbase philanthropy, which is like I think it's important to not abstract. I mean, there's a kind of conversation about abstracting people into institutions that we kind of like assume the worst about, and they're all about this, right? Like these are like the person that I spoke with. I'm following my follow up conversation next week. Actually worked on like this data analytics platform that he realized was then being used by the Canadian government to censor people. How ironic! Not a unanimously mute, mute, mute. Okay, great. Ironically, he built technology that was then bought by some kind of big corporation that then partnered with the Canadian government to like crack down on like dissent. Um, and so he literally says he wants to use the Coinbase philanthropy fund to as karmic restoration, or I forget what the word he said, but just like to like atone for his sins. So like I actually have a really good like I actually spent a lot of time with the Coinbase team at ETH Denver. They're really amazing people. I think I greenpilled like a lot of them, and I like I
1000%. Yeah.
I don't want to rule out working with. I would call them transitionary institutions. I don't know where Coinbase is going to be in 10 years. I hope that crypto is like so widely adopted, and the idea of that decentralization is so widely adopted that Coinbase is not needed, even if it is succeeding. But we also have to not be so in the clouds as well about like the fact that people like custodial wallets, of all the CEOs that could be running a kind of crypto organization, I would argue Brian Armstrong is like one of the better ones and like a true believer in crypto broadly. So, anyways, I don't just I'm not just defending Coinbase just because I think they'd be good partners. I think it's just good to have like a broader conversation about like the transitionary. We're kind of in a liminal moment, right? We're in a transitional moment between like old world and new world, and to whatever extent we can green pill individuals in kind of the old in I don't even like semi old world institutions to help fund the new world. Like I think it's just smart. But also I'm open to hearing what other people think.
I think that resonates a lot. For example, like I work with 50 years, which is like a VC that invests like a pre-seed and seed stage, but like the team is actually like the end goal is to do whatever it takes to solve deep world problems. So like we invest a lot in like biotech and climate and hardware and like new energy. So like what I want to say is like sometimes like we also see like VC like, oh, it's taking equity, but sometimes like if we enable like the good VCs, the ones who actually want to do this because they want to help founders, because they could actually connect us to entrepreneurs, to green pill the entrepreneurs, the network, the different areas, and make sure that like green pilling some VCs to make sure that their money and their investment is actually going to green pill projects or region projects instead of like just funding whatever is next NFT could be quite powerful. And I think another area, a topic I really like was how Lynn described like, okay, if we want like what are the main gaps, what are the main problems? Like right now, like we're using like only a small percentage, like a lot of people are using it, but a small percentage of the world it's actually like using crypto every day or like and using Web3 for their institutions. I always wonder like if we should actually do like a collective sense making of like what are the biggest gaps we have right now that we should solve for before we start scaling to everyone, and like how do we scale sustainably. Like maybe that's one of the reasons why like it's so small, because like there's so many gaps and failure points right now where like we are a community that is like willing to go through this like rough bumpy road and like get around those. So like once we scale, like what are the potential risks of bringing them to so many new people that it actually kind of there's many breaking points kind of. So what should we start tackling, and where should we be focusing our efforts to scale efficiently?
Yeah, I feel like this emphasis on individuals versus systems or organizations is really key. Because we are in this moment of transition where like we don't know what from these legacy systems is going to survive. And I don't know, maybe maybe this is just me, but maybe hopefully like a lot of it won't. That what we're building here can just totally render it obsolete and create something that's much better. And when it comes into the conversation about VCs, I think the hesitation that a lot of people feel is that, like, on a very fundamental level, historically speaking, VC's primary purpose or objective is to create more money, right? Like that's the bottom line of what they're doing. But I also have had like very positive interactions with folks working particularly in like VC Web3 space, at least, in my experience or my perception of it has been positive, that I can feel a genuine positive intention or desire to do good. And I've had some interesting conversations even about like VCs funding public goods. So I think like, I don't know, this is when we come back to like individual humans and having meaningful dialogue with them in a way that, that might start to shape the philosophical foundation of like why they're building what they're building. I feel like maybe that's the most powerful space, is if we can start to shape or shift the why behind what we're all creating here, and to create some kind of cohesion again around that future trajectory or the vision that we're building towards, that we will naturally magnetize ideologically aligned folks that may be in very different parts of the ecosystem, and ones that we might have been reticent to collaborate with, but in this moment of liminality, of transition, we can build bridges rather than silos, and I think that's going to be a part of building a path forward.
Unbelievably beautifully said. Just to give it like another example of an individual interaction, I become close with the senior manager of the NFT platform for Coinbase, and she got completely greenpilled at ETH Denver. Definitely not just by me, is also because she spent a lot of time at Shelling Point. And before that, the week before, we had an intro call before we hung out in person in Denver. And the Skywalker's NFT collection, I'm not saying it's the only one, but she talks to so many NFT creators, and that was the first social impact NFT that she had been exposed to, and her jaw was just on the floor, like about like how we're actually using NFTs to kind of create like a shared sense of like community, to help with financial literacy for the kids, all these things, right? And so I'm in talks with her to have an entire category dedicated to social impact NFTs, and like there's actually a way to leverage kind of the competition of the markets, right? Because Coinbase is competing with Crypto.com, competing with et cetera, FTX, and so like none of these like monstrous, I'm not saying in a bad way, just like big institutions have put their flag in the ground about regen Web3, right? So we can actually play the competitive sort of economic dynamics. I'm just saying like, hey, like if you want to be first into supporting this regenerative renaissance, you can be. We're going to welcome you. We're not going to demonize you just because you are listed on the S&P 500. And then so she's been helping Greenpill all of her colleagues, right? Introducing me to like 4 or 5 people already in Coinbase.
That's so cool to hear. That's kind of just making my head spin, just coming from like the NFT side of things, and hearing about big players really considering that as a strategic move. I think that's kind of how we've seen it for a while, but it's great that it's really popping up on their radar. You had mentioned this show with episodes, and maybe I missed something earlier on when you were talking about that, but I'm wondering if, probably as this conversation is coming closer to a close, what are you planning on doing? Are there action items for us? What do we want to do if we want to just be involved with what you guys are doing next?
All right, I'm gonna drop a Telegram group where we're just kind of like we're figuring it as we go. I'm gonna so like Ian, who I talked about, he's like a creative genius guy who's been waiting for this, like waiting for a meaningful story to be told. I'm gonna like really workshop him with him, like what is the narrative arc? Because I'm like Madison can attest. I'm changing my mind on things I had conviction about like every day. And like this is why I tweeted. I was like, change your mind is a superpower. Because like we live in such a disorienting liminal time where like um people and institutions are transcending categories, right? The idea of like this is fully decentralized or centralized. This person's a good. Like I mean, this boils down to like Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche, right? It's like you. I'm not gonna pretend I can cite philosophy like that, but like people transcend these basic dichotomies that we create for them, and like individual inspiring conversations, you might call it green pill conversations, can actually turn them into allies, help them find their purpose, help them find their U-shaped hole in building this regenerative renaissance. And so I guess we're sort of practicing what we preach here through having these sort of conversations, helping people see the possibility that we don't have to have a doomerist attitude, or even like I notice this sometimes even in like the regenerative crypto space, like a isolationism about like government is screwed, right? Let's build this kind of like transnational sort of government support system, and I think it's like yes and right, because that transnational like government public goods funding system puts pressure on the legacy systems to level up, right? Especially if our story is told is being seen by millions. And like Sally, 12-year-old Sally from Connecticut is emailing their local legislator. They're like, hey, why have you not said anything about this amazing movement that's being born? Sorry. So I kind of made that more philosophical than the practical. The practical thing again is I'm dropping a Telegram. Um, I will be proactive about asking. I'm gonna do a lot of thinking about like what are the exact next steps over like this next week, and so I am absolutely looking to figure out which Gitcoiners want to be involved and can be involved and how. Like for example, Scott is very very busy, but we were talking about how even just having like a weekly sync, like a 30 minutes, like if this project is like we all agree that this should be done and get funded and all that, right? Like a 30-minute sync of like, okay, who should be added to this movement? Who should Gary or other like project managers of this be meeting? And like Polygon, who's the best person to talk to about Polygon, about a grant from Polygon, right? So there's already so much energy and like there's so much like credibility and network built through this Gitcoin ecosystem. I suspect a lot of the lift is not that much for many individuals, but I think part of this initial process is like doing of an official. No worries. I think like one of the most immediate steps is like identifying who wants to be and kind of cataloging their superpowers and trying and like just it's just like a game of coordination really. again, and I'm very open-minded about the structure, about the structure and process by which we make this thing happen, because I really believe that this needs to be done in a very Web3 way.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Gary. That was actually very inspiring. So much energy, which is very admirable. We are past time, and so I mean, I really appreciate that everybody's still staying on this call, even though it's like definitely past your time. So, thank you so much. So we're gonna wait for Gary to post the Telegram, either in the thread, if we do it in the library or the general, Gary, or even in the thread, and then just feel free. And whoever is interested, feel free to like kind of text, either DM me, DM Gary, DM the group, and just kind of like let us know that this is where you want to be involved, and then we'll definitely keep you in mind for that as well. So yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Feel free to be on your way, be green pilled, and go on the week. Enjoy. I'll be here for the next like maybe 10 minutes just to chill and just to kind of talk and relax a bit, or I'll let Gary talk more about green pilling and ideating on this.
No, yeah, I think we can open it up to any questions or anything. But Lynn, thank you so much for kind of impromptu. I know it's kind of like oddly, in some ways, it was a good thing that Ale, was kind of getting over some sickness, so we could kind of talk about this, because time is of the essence. And like, one design choice I do want to like get people's thoughts on, because again, I come to this with a lot of humility, because I've only been in the space, besides buying some crypto in 2017, since August, right? And Simona suggested that the launch pad, like the setting of the pilot, be ETH Amsterdam. Has anyone been to ETH Amsterdam? Do they like the vibe there? Do they agree that this is a good kind of like spiritual grounding place to kind of exposit like the potential of Web3 and the movement? Anyone have any other ideas? I'm just really open to hearing.
I mean, I haven't been to ETH Denver yet, ETH Amsterdam, but I think they're planning on doing a Shelling Point there, and that really seems like an excellent launch pad.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. Okay, so is Shelling Point a brand that started in Denver this year?
Yes. Yeah, that was the
Oh,
first one. Actually, let me see. They're starting the planning meetings for those tomorrow, and it makes sense for you to be looped in somewhat. Either I can just be the go-between, or I can actually get you in that meeting.
yeah. Well, Colton, I mean, if you, yeah, I mean, maybe you and I find time also just kind of jam on ideas, because you're super creative. So I'll DM you, just again, like, we're